Hey guys, what's going on? It's P. Gamboa here, and in today's episode we are going to be retrofitting Illuminated door handles. That's right, these are Illuminated door handles from a Cadillac Escalade, and we will be retrofitting these onto my 2016 Chevy Silverado LT. These handles came off of a 2014 to 2017 Escalade. These are Illuminated door handles. You can see right there. We're going to be throwing these onto my truck, and I'll be going over how to install this and how to wire it up. One thing to note on these is these do have the passive lock and unlock button. Obviously, since our trucks don't have that, that feature will be omitted. I've got another handle here shown taken apart. I did have to get these painted. When I bought these, the trim top bezel piece came in a chrome platinum style painted finish, just like this right here. So I did get these painted. We're going to be putting these onto my truck today, and if you wanted to see or get a preview of what they look like illuminated, there you go. It illuminates a nice white, very similar to a puddle lamp or the cargo bed lamps or the interior dome lamp. It's got a nice white shine to it. So we'll be getting these installed onto my truck. To give you guys an idea of the exploded view, you've got the base here, which is identical to what we have now. The difference between this one and our handle is that for the LED piece that goes in, GM had to make a bezel that goes on top like so over the LED. And so in our trucks, this handle is all one piece instead of the two pieces here. So same goes for the smaller end piece. You can see here you've got a cap that goes over the top, and the base is the same. So here's the piece broken apart here. You've got that main piece, you've got your cover. This cover does have a couple of locking tabs here, so you have to be careful removing this. And then your metal base plate, if you will, your rubber gasket, and then your button. So I'm pretty excited about these. I've been wanting to do this mod for a while. Finally found the time to do it. The weather's much nicer now. So we're gonna get these installed onto my truck. One more thing I wanted to note, the connectors on here. This one here is a 3-pin connector, and this one here is a 5-pin connector. So the 5-pin connector is designated for the front doors, and the 3-pin connector is designated for the rear doors. And the reason for that is because the wireless transmitter, if you will, has additional circuits in this connector. So for the retrofit and the fact that we're going to be omitting the button, we will not be able to get that added or have that functional. I will be replacing these connectors with just a 2-pin connection. You essentially need power and ground. So we'll be tying these into the puddle lamps. If you have a DL3 mirror, that's the same lamp that shines downward as you unlock your doors at night. So that's the way Escalade has it wired up, so I'll be wiring up the same. So let's get started. All right guys, before we get started on the wiring, I wanted to go through how to actually take this handle apart for the purposes of prep and painting. So we'll start with the little guy here. This guy here, again, that top cap or bezel, if you will, does need to get removed from the back. So to remove this metal base, there'll be a tab here, and you just want to gently pull that this way as you lift up and out. So it just pops out just like that. So that goes away. And on the inside, you'll notice there are some tabs in here. So you just want to lift those tabs up with a flathead and just gently pry this guy out. So this guy slides out, but you do want to get a small flathead on the inside. So once you have that piece out, you can move on to the handle itself. Now on the handle itself uses a Torx T7. So you just remove that guy. Once that's out, you want to take the handle and slide the cover off that way. like so, and the cover comes off. Once you have the cover off, the LED portion just pops right out, like so, and then you've got your button. So the button does come in that platinum color like I showed you earlier, so just make sure you pop that out. Get it painted if you want that to be color matched. The LED strip, you can hang on to that. So the bottom base will need to get painted, the cover button, and the top bezel. And on the smaller piece, you'll want to have that cap painted along with that base. So, hope that helps. Let's get on to the wiring. Alright guys, for the wiring of the illuminated door handles onto the puddle lamp circuit, the plan that I've got for that is to deliver that circuit the way that I think that GM would have done it. So, for the front doors would probably be easier than the rear doors. And the reason being is because for the front doors, the puddle lamp circuit is delivered into the door through the door jamb connector. So this is the actual door jamb connector. This is the main boot that connects in the door jamb. So when you disconnect this, the door jamb connector will have your puddle lamp circuit in there. And for references, it's going to be pin number 3 on this. So this bottom right corner pin here is pin number 3. And as you're looking at it from the front, it'll be the bottom left corner. So in most trucks, the puddle lamp circuit is delivered to the front door. What we need to do is actually add that puddle lamp circuit to the harness and deliver that all the way through down the harness. And this connector here plugs into the door locks. So my plan is to have a puddle lamp circuit and ground run down the harness, and then have about, I don't know, a 3-foot coil here. And then what I plan on doing is I plan on using these connectors. This is a 2-pin connector that GM uses for a lot of their wiring. So I'm going to use a 2-pin connector that's going to land the puddle lamp on the ground, and then I will be replacing this connector on this end with the mate that connects to this connector here. So in terms of the part numbers, these are the part numbers that I picked up from Mauser. So you've got 1563189-1, and then you've got the mate of this connector here, which is 1563190. I tried ordering the mate connectors for these guys, which Mauser seems to be the only one that carries them, but they're on back order till November of 2017. So in the meantime, I want to get these hooked up. I'm going to be removing these connectors and installing these connectors in its place for now. So once I've got that wiring landed here at the end of the harness, it'll be like a 3-foot loop with a 2-pin connector installed, and then we will be replacing this connector with the mate. So that's the plan of how I plan on delivering the puddle lamp circuit to the front doors. And again, that puddle lamp circuit is here in the door jamb, and we'll just add that circuit here. And on this particular harness, you can see that pin 3 right there is empty. So if you do have DL3 mirrors already, that pin 3 slot will be loaded. In that case, if that slot is already loaded, my plan is to remove that pin and crimp an additional wire to that pin, so we have a puddle lamp going down to the mirror, and then a second wire that goes all the way down the harness down to the end to make that connection in the door handle. Now for the rear doors are going to be a little more challenging. Since the rear door does not have a puddle lamp circuit delivered, what I plan on doing is on the front doors, I am going to be removing pin 3 and adding an extra wire to that terminal so that it'll be a splice, if you will. So I'm going to have a splice wire that comes out of this slot 3, run it down the door sill and up the B-pillar of the back doors, and then essentially do the same thing. I'm going to land that wire into the equivalent of this connector in the rear door, and then do the same thing on the door panel harness so we can get that delivered. So let's get started. Alright guys, so I've got my door panel taken off, I've got my harness removed, and I was kind of scoping out the logical approach of how I want to get this door handle wired up. And so what I've done is this slot here is the slot where the last part of the harness for the door actually connects into. So So this harness comes out of here and that green connector plugs up. So I think what I plan on doing is I'm going to be adding that wire to the end of this harness. I'm going to come out of this harness and then essentially work my way up and use this hole here, which I think that's what that cap is probably for, and that's where I'll land the pigtail for the door handle. And if I look in there, I can actually see the door handle. So I think that's going to be the best way to avoid any of the moving parts of the glass. So that's what I plan on doing is I'm going to run that all the way across down the bottom. I'll come out of that hole and then I'll run my final harness up to the top for the door handle. So just wanted to point that out. That is capped by default. So there you go. All right guys, so I've got my door harness out, and as mentioned earlier, pin number 3 or slot number 3 is what we're going to want to use. And as you can see here, my harness already has that terminal loaded. So the plan is to remove that terminal and recrimp a new terminal with an extra gray wire added to the gray wire that's already in here. That'll give me the splice that I need to go all the way down the harness and down to the end. So we will remove this terminal. There is a special tool required that essentially will push down. It enters on the left and right sides of that cavity there, and what that does is it depresses down on those tangs right there. So as you're looking at this from the front, you do have to depress those tangs in order for you to remove the terminal. And on the connector itself, you do have to lift this pink terminal position assurance tab up, and you do so with the flathead screwdriver at the bottom. You'll hear 2 clicks as you move it up, so you move it all the way up and then bring it back down 1 click. And the reason for the 2-step lock is you've got the larger pins at the bottom. So we're going to take that guy out. I'm going to cut the end off, and I will recrimp an extra gray wire on top of that, recrimp it, reload it, and then run that gray wire down all the way down to the end of the harness and looping at the end for the door handle. So this is the terminal removal tool. This is made by T&E. That's the manufacturer of the company that makes the pins. So this is what that tool looks like. It will give you the ability to essentially insert this down like so. And once that's inserted, you should be able to pull that wire out. And there you have it. So I pulled pin number 3 out, or slot number 3, out of this connector. That's the puddle lamp circuit. And it's a gray wire with a white stripe. So the plan here is to cut this off, recrimp a new end with an extra wire, and that extra wire will go down the line. As for the ground, there's a spot down here in the connector. This guy in the mirror connector, actually, there's a ground connection that we can splice into. If you unwrap this harness, GM has a pretty large ground splice tap down here in this area here. So any ground will work fine. Chassis ground, will splice that in and then run that wire, that black wire, down with the gray wire that comes off this guy here. All right, so I've got that terminal end cut. I've measured out some gray wire, stripped the end off, and we're going to crimp a new terminal. And these are the terminals that go into the door connector here, female, and part number is 962943-2 from Mauser. And we'll get that crimped on and then reinserted. All right, so I've got that extra wire crimped on, and we're going to insert that into slot number 3 of the connector. So now that's inserted, we will take this gray wire and run it down the boot along to the far end of this gray connector. We'll run it through this housing or boot housing, and then I will coil it up so I can understand the lengths to put the end on. All right, so I've got the harness here unwrapped. I've got my gray wire ran through the boot. I've got my black wire here, and as you unwrap this, you'll notice there's 3 22 gauge wires. If you unwrap this harness, right around this area, there's a splice point where all 3 of these black wires splices into that thicker black wire there. So I'm going to do my splice up here. I'm going to be splicing into the ground that connects into the mirror, and on the ground connection, we're looking at pins 1, 2, 3, 4. So pins 5 or pin 10 here. The second pin to the right is what we're going to be tapping. So Any one of these black wires in the back you can tap into. Again, you can tap it down here, but I found that tapping it up here would give me more flexibility. So I'm going to tap that or splice that black wire, and then I'll have my black and gray running down the harness down to the far end. Okay, so I've got the ground connection spliced. Again, I chose a splice point ahead of this boot here. Got that spliced in. That black wire runs through the boot and meets up with my gray wire. The gray wire comes from the main 41 pin boot. So I've got my black and gray. I'm going to wrap this with automotive harness tape. I'll run it all along down the channel, and we will end up with a spool at the end here. And then we'll have that pinned with the 2-pin connector. Got this all wrapped up. I've got that 2-wire wire loom going through the existing harness, going through the door boot, and then down to the end, and that green connector plugs into your door lock actuator. So I left myself an extra loom, and this is where we will land the connector, and we can get that plugged into the door handle. So for the actual 2-pin connector that I'm going to be using on the end of this harness, I went with these 2-pin connectors from Mauser. These are T&E connectivity connectors, and the part numbers on these again here is 1563189-1 and 1563190-1. As for the terminals, your terminals down here, this one here, that's going to be part number 962943-2, and for the male terminal, that's going to be part number 964265-2. Now, the reason why I went with this particular connector system is because I already have these pins. These are the same pins that will be going into the door side or the cabin side connector, and the same pins that go into the main 41 pin door boot connector. So the reason why I went with those, it's the same connector, same pins, same terminals, and we're going to be using that to run this signal down to the rear doors. So we'll get those stripped, crimped on, and we're going to have to, again, take off the connector on this guy and then use these instead. So we'll get that done. All right, so here are the male crimps, and we're going to be inserting it into this guy here. To insert this, you're going to want to lift that tab up. That's what locks it in. So we'll get that inserted. We'll be using pin 1 for the power and then pin 2 for the ground, and we'll keep that consistent on all 4 doors. To unpin this guy, you're going to want to take a small flat head and in this slot here, pry this back lock connector off and out, and on the front you're going to have a terminal position assurance lock. Same thing, take a flat head, pry that guy up. Now the one in the front, I don't think this needs to come all the way out, but essentially you're going to want to take a pick tool and get it down in the groove to remove that terminal. So I went ahead and removed the red terminal position assurance connector all the way out to take a peek down in the channel here. And actually you do want to take that out, because as you can see, those tabs inside the connector, you're going to want to take a flathead, lift those up, and then your terminal should slide out. So we'll get those taken out. So I've got the JST connector removed, and what we're left with are these 5 terminals. Now when we go to repin this, the blue wire is the ground wire and the white wire is your supply voltage. So the blue wire will go to ground and the white to the puddle lamp circuit. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off these terminals. I will tape back the gray, green, yellow, and red. We'll be using blue and white. Connector crimped, and I am using the female connector here for the handle side, and then the male side for the harness side, male connector for the harness side. So I did have some issues inserting this one in. I was not paying attention to the orientation of that. So make sure you pay attention to the orientation as you're inserting those so that they match up. If you rotate this 180 degrees like I did, it will not insert. You'll have a hard time. So so that's ready to go. This does plug in nicely. So we'll get that installed into the door now. Alright guys, so I've got my harness reinstalled, and here we've got that pigtail that I was talking about. This is the pigtail that will run up and through this hole here to plug into the door handle. So now all that's left is to get that routed. I may see if this hole here is an option to use one of those clips to keep it up, and then maybe tuck it in front of the door lock here. So all we need to do now is swap the handle out and plug it in. So I've got the door handle on, and what I ended up doing was I reinstalled the original smaller base plate for the keyhole, but as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap here, and so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the one that comes with the bezel, so that provides a smooth transition. So I'm going to remove the keyhole piece and install the piece that came with the door handle. And there you go. I've got that installed. Now we just need to plug it in and test it out. Alright guys, this is what I was going to be afraid of. One of the issues we've got is that if I run this harness down this hole and connect it to the door handle, the glass gets in the way. And so, you know, the glass goes all the way to the edge, right? So anything that's ran along this side will get caught when you roll that window down. So it looks like with the window rolled all the way down, our best bet is to pull this harness out, probably get it into this area and go down and underneath and up right here. The connection is actually right up in this area up here. So I think that's going to be the best bet, is to pull this back and pigtail it off down here and then go underneath and up. So I'm going to go ahead and redo that. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so I've removed the harness from this loom, brought it back inside, and like I said, I'm going to have this run down and underneath the glass so it doesn't catch. The glass is at its lowest point. So this should clear now. Luckily I've made a long enough of a spool to reach up and actually connect it to the door handle. Alright, so I've got that rerouted. You can see the black wire right there. I will roll the window down now. And it clears nicely. Alright, so now that we've got the driver's side handle complete, we're going to run the circuit for the rear door, and what we're going to do here is we're going to remove this boot and do the same thing we did on this side to the other side. And so that's going to be pin 3. We're going to remove this cabin side connector, body side connector. We're going to pull it out. We're going to bring it into the footwell, and we're going to cut terminal 3. We're going to crimp a new terminal on it with an extra gray wire, and then we're going to run that gray wire down the door sill, and we're going to run it up the B-pillar, and essentially what we're going to do is land that gray wire into the body side of this connector, and then do the same thing on this connector. We are going to use an unused slot and do the same thing with your gray wire and black to the rear door. Alright guys, so I've got the door sill off, and I've got the B-pillar cover off, and what we're going to be doing is running the puddle lamp circuit from that door jamb connector body side down the door sill. I've got the rear door sill off, and I've got the B-pillar, and if you look in this cavity, you'll see the backside of the door jamb connector for the rear door. So we're going to pull that guy out, we're going to inspect it, and we will use hopefully slot 3 if we can, like we did to the front, and we'll take the door harness out and pin that pin 3 for the Illuminated door handle. Alright, so I've taken the body side door connector out for the rear door, and after inspecting it, it looks like pin 3 is an empty cavity. So it's going to be, if you're looking at this from the back, the bottom right corner, that slot right there, you can see that is pin 3. So on the door, or the harness side, pin 3 is also vacant on this right there. So we'll do the same thing we did with the front. We'll get both sides loaded with our gray wire, and that gray wire is going to be tapped from the door connector up the front. We're going to run that gray wire down the door sill, up the B-pillar, and into this connector. I've got my gray wire ran from the front door jamb to the back, wrapped it with some automotive harness tape, wrapped it up in this wire loom, and again, this is going to land on pin 3, which is going to be that bottom right corner slot. I'll cut this back, strip some wire, and land that terminal. Pin 3, bottom left, if you're looking at it from the front, bottom right if you're looking at it from the back. And 3, that bottom left corner next to that black dot landed. Gray wire. We'll go ahead and put this back into the door jamb. Alright guys, so I've got the front door boot taken off. The body side connector has been removed, brought into the footwell, and this is it right here. There's a small access opening right in this cavity, right in here, that this connector will come out from. Now you do need to remove this by tipping the top forward and then backing it out. That cavity in there is pretty tight, so you're going to struggle with that, trying to get that out. So just back it out with the top tilted forward and then bottom out and pull it out. So looking at this connector, we talked about pin number 3 or slot number 3, which is this gray with a green stripe wire, pin 3 there. And as you can see, the factory did already land 2 wires into that slot. So we're going to remove it and we're going to crimp a 3rd wire, or gray wire, and this will be for the rear door. So we're going to do the same concept. We're going to remove it, crimp it, or if you just want to splice it with your own method, you can do that too. One thing I wanted to note, if you are going to be crimping this the way that I'm showing here in this video, you are going to need a special tool to remove the pin. And on the front side, there's a plastic barrier that conceals the slots where the actual tool goes in. So using like a pick tool, go ahead and remove that cover. Keep in mind that this may be hot. There is a battery positive voltage on here, so that line is always hot. So just take note of that as you're working in this connector. And again, this is that plastic faceplate I was telling you about. So once you remove this guy, you'll be exposed to the cavities in which you can insert your terminal removal tool through those slots for each pin. Alright, there you have it. So my gray wire for the rear door is now properly landed onto slot number 3, along with the gray with the green striped wire. And if we look at the front, that pin 3 is loaded. So we will put the plastic faceplate back on, and then we'll put this back into the door jamb. Alright, so I've got that all put back in place. My door jamb connector is back in. My harness connection is back in place. We'll replace the door sill, and then we'll work on the back door. Alright guys, so I've got the rear door harness pulled out, and the rear door harness is not as easy as the front door, I guess, since I've only done the back door a couple of times. So the rear door harness, there's a window track here that looks like this. This is what guides the glass down, and this thing is bolted here and here. And so the door harness actually, let me see if I can grab it here. So this actual door harness, the way that it's mounted where it's in front of this guy. So to try to pull it out of that cavity, if this guy's in the way, then the harness wraps in front of it. So I had to remove this guy to get the door harness out. So not a big deal. 2 bolts to remove, one up there and one down here, slotted down here. So you just need to remember to replace that when you're done. Alright guys, so I've got my gray wire landed just like we did for the front door. This is landed on pin number 3, as you can see right there. Same terminals, same process. Pin number 3, gray wire. It's going to run all the way down the length of the harness, and I figured the stopping point for this gray wire is going to be right about here. This is the airbag sensor module that's in the door. So I'm going to stop it right here, and this is where we're going to go down up under the glass. In terms of the ground, I found that the easiest spot for the ground would be pulling off this green connector. This is what plugs into the door lock, I believe. And pin number 3 on this is a black wire. I did a continuity check, and pin 3 of this guy is the same ground as the main pin 2 on this guy here. So we're going to run the black wire tapping off the ground on this, and both will meet up at this junction, and then we'll go up to the door handle. Alright guys, so I've got that gray wire loomed through the main part of the harness, and like I showed you earlier, we're going to stop right at this clip here, and I've made a pigtail to come up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a black wire and tap off pin 3 on this green connector. We'll probably tap it somewhere in here. We'll run that black wire down, and we'll mate it up with this, so we have a puddle light and ground wire going to a 2-pin connector. Alright, so I've got the driver rear handle completed, and just like the one in the front, your pin 1 will be the white wire for your puddle lamp, and then the blue will be pin 2 for your ground, and on the other end the gray wire is the puddle lamp for pin 1 and pin 2 is black for ground. So we'll get these installed and we'll test it out. Alright guys, I've got the rear driver side door harness put back in. Here is my wire loom for the handle. One thing I wanted to note is when you're reinstalling your harness, there's a cable here. I believe this is for the window motor to go up and down. So just make sure your harness goes in front of it. Make sure you snap in all of your retaining clips so that nothing gets caught on the glass. And my harness will essentially just tuck down in the bottom and head on up and connect to the door handle up top. So, alright, so for the rear smaller caps, I have an issue fitting the new cap, and this is the one with the cap, the bezel trim, if you will, as opposed to my stock one. And so what I've noticed is that it's not actually going in, it's not fitting. And if you compare the steel piece that's inside the new cap, it's different. And so I think I'll need to remove the plastic piece and transfer it over so that that set screw can actually catch. And so if I turn these here on its side, you'll kind of see the stops. So I can't get this steel piece to insert, so I'm gonna have to move this plastic insert over, and we'll get that put in. All right, so I was able to move that piece over, so it looks like it's a direct fit. We'll get it put in the truck now. Well, there you have it, guys. Illuminated door handles on my 2016 Chevy Silverado. I've got the driver's side done. I'll be working on the passenger side tomorrow. I'll take some nighttime shots, but they do work. I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of bright out, but unlock, lock, unlock, and lock. The passive button is omitted, non-functional. But there you go, we'll get some night shots. Passenger side, and like I said earlier, the body side connector, which is in this slot that this guy connects to, needs to come out and be brought into the footwell area. I did have to remove some screws to get this guy out so I can work on it, but again, it's going to be the same thing. I just wanted to show you here. It's going to be pin 3. If you're looking at this from the back, it's going to be that gray wire with a green stripe. Pin location number 3, same process. Lift this guy up, remove that plastic insert, use a terminal removal tool and pull this guy out. We'll recrimp, or you can just simply splice into this gray wire with green stripe. So I just wanted to show that to you. I did have to remove this guy or lower it to get my hands underneath. I did remove the door sill kick panel, so just wanted to show that to you. Alright guys, I've got the passenger side done. All 4 handles are installed. I did have an issue with one of the caps. The cover was broken, so I'm actually keeping the stock plate in. As you can see, there is a difference in the offset with the cap versus the original, so I'll be fixing that once I get that corrected. And here it is with the correct cover. You can see it flows nicely there. So all done. The install took me pretty much all day. Of course, I was recording, so if I go to unlock the truck, you can see they light up there. Let's take a look at the other side. Better shot there. They've got the same shade or shine as the puddle lamp under the mirror, so I'm pretty happy. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. Until next time, see you guys.